During the pentagram rite, a darkness descended over the ritual space, and it had some little sparks of colors in it. In the first set of vibrations, I saw pink glow above white peaks. Then there was a red shape that I can't quite describe in the northwest. It became surrounded by presences. And at one point, to the north, I saw 10 white orbs in what used to be the first row for horizons in this building. I felt watched from the northwest around the strange red object that had found itself there. In the final reading, I felt mechanics and the voice from beneath that sounded like as if scraping rocks were talking had stopped. And so did the sense of a rolling movement below me come to a stop. I felt very content, still, whether I was or not, and kind of like I was floating in space. I didn't feel pressed upon. I didn't feel as if I was pressing upon anything. In the final scrying, I saw a series of ripples in a white landscape. All pain and stiffness and congestion left me, or at least the sense did, in a sense of tingling euphoria that left me feeling connected to like a mechanical order of the environment around me, both within and without this building, which probably won't be used by the time this video is released. The introduction lays forth some very important points. If we connect this to H.P. Lovecraft probably modeled the Necronomicon and its backstory on the Picatrix. In Latin, Picatrix is called the author. Certain objective claims about the book can't be trusted. Certain things could possibly be illegal. Other things could be dangerous in terms of unnecessary harm. You can tell that it's quasi-Islamic. I mean, it definitely deviates in some regards, but, you know, the author was definitely influenced by the Islamic way of doing things. The footnotes point out some interesting things, like what the Arabic would be of some of the terms. Just like I would like to know what the Hebrew or Aramea, actually, because that's the biblical age language of some of the Kabbalah terms. Because obviously, if this is where the tradition's coming from, I mean, not this, this does seem to connect to the Sapiens and stuff like that from Haran. Some things mentioned are hard to obtain, are expensive, and of course those can be sort of replaced with other alternatives if, you know. And I would say, did I mention that some stuff that's mentioned as safe isn't safe, and some stuff that's mentioned not safe ends up being safe? So, and before I get into saying something about book 1 and what book 2 is going to be, we should consider what type of magic per se this is all referring to. You can say it's very right-hand path because it draws down, so the direction is coming in. It's sort of almost vampiric. The first question that I might ask people if I was going to do an interview based on this book would be to ask them, what is your place in the universe? And, you know, 3 verses that I say when I do this contemplative reading and scrying stuff in the evening is that I state the purpose of life. I state why. I state a response. 3 very quick verses. 51, 56 to 58 is the reference in Al-Quran. And here they remind you that magic is supposed to be to serve God, but of course, maybe that's an even higher blasphemy if you say that seher, you know, if that's what's meant, seher, then obviously serving deity through what's not allowed might be, you know. Then we're asked, what is magic? Some people, I might ask, what is religion? What is spirituality? What is meditation? That sort of thing. Well, again, it's a processing of consciousness. It's a progress. I mean, this book puts things in terms of ascent. Then we're asked about cosmology. And this book talks about the heavens in very astronomical terms. Chapter 4 of book 1 will ask you, well, what do we do about it? And so it talks about the lunar mansions, and it talks about some attributes that people would work with that. Chapter 5 would get into form and substance, so it gets a lot into graven images and that sort of thing. And it connects astrology to some other symbolism. Now, there are some things in this book that make apparent that the person does not know, you know, the person who composed the Picatrix, or at least the translator missed that some things were assumed to be the case. It's better to say, rather than nothing does this, that I don't know of anything that does this. Chapter 6 connects us to the question about what is existence and how do the aspects of existence relate to each other. And certainly, there's that whole illusion and delusion thing that we can relate to things in the East. But there's also more the degrees of permanence and placement. Chapter 7 would relate to, how do we know? What sort of things are going to be known? What are the degrees and all of it? Now, the universe is seen as having different spheres. And the outer edge of what Islam deems the lower universe is the 8th sphere in this book. Maybe the 9th would imply, heaven as the European way of expressing Christianity and stuff would call it, or, the biblical way of heaven as like the place of God, per se. So we're going to have with book 2, how to approach science, heavenly secrets. What about the sun and the moon and the planets? How does things move? Oh, by the way, I'm switching to a different chapter with things. Chapter 5. How does it relate to the different nations? Chapter 6. What is the power in magical forms? Chapter 7. Dialectics. Chapter 8, Natural Order. Chapter 9, how does this draw from planets? All that stuff about drawing down the moon and stuff that you hear about Wicca and stuff like this. It didn't start with Wicca. Chapter 10, the stones. Because we've talked about before that there are certain substances that are more effectual in some of these things. And then you relate to the 10-degree portions of the sky. And chapter 12 would relate to the 360 degrees. And try to connect to something about the Hindus. Now, there's a phrase mentioned in this book, nigromancia, which would be the black divination, because this sort of practice was connected to an idea of secrecy. That's what was meant by occult. Whether it was an approved thing or not, it was trying, like almost sort of a spying operation could be put into magic. There was a movie that came out when I was little. Beetlejuice, Beetlejuice, Beetlejuice. And here we have Betelgeuse and Telechia. And we also have some sort of barbarous formulas, you could say, are formulas that sound like mantras from various languages. But it's like what completes the manifestation.